Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Every country which wants to progress, which wants to be a leader, which wants to assure its citizens the best of everything, must have institutions that are above approach, above reproach, above any such feature or defect that might mar their acceptance. It's the institutions that not only create a country, but make a country strong, respected, and honored. It's not the foreign grants that give you credibility, but the strength of your institution. And the shocking revelations of rampant sexual misconduct in Canadian armed forces is shocking to the world and shocking to the country because here sex has not been the major problem. It is there, but not in the way that it should bring dishonor and disrepute to the most important institution, that's the armed forces. Separate allegations of sexual misconduct against the former Chief of Defense Staff, General Vance, and his successor, Admiral MacDonald, have in fact created an atmosphere of fear, of resentment, as well as of a miasma that reflects ill on the armed forces. Who is at fault? Is it the government? Is it the defense minister? Is it the army officers? Or is it the system? Anyway, armed forces have shown their commitment to eradicate this sexual harassment and violence. And the feminist approach of the federal government, according to some, is helping them eradicate this evil if it can be eradicated. But it's a deja vu for the survivors of the sexual assault and harassment of the military. As a matter of fact, if you see that in the recent decade, this issue has been repeatedly raised, and not only in defense services, but also in the military college at Kingston. It is clear that sexual harassment and assault of military employees is a systemic problem. And now they are going to have a second review in 6 years, which shows something is drastically wrong. So, how did this controversy start? The latest controversy involving Vance and McDonald is shocking because the whole Canadian military culture has failed to protect the victims of sexual harassment. In 1998, Maclean magazine wrote a pattern of sexual harassment. It interviewed 13 women who were sexually assaulted in the armed forces. The survivors experienced nervous breakdowns, depression, and at least one of them attempted suicide. All left the forces, and that's a loss to the forces. Heartbroken, with their careers shattered, angry, because the military response worsened their condition. And after 1998, in 2014, that is 16 years passed, no action was taken. And the magazine revisited this issue. But there was no evidence of a cultural shift. Evidently, the institution closes its eyes to the victims and even punishes the women who denounce their rapists, rejects the very moment they start heading down the spiral of trauma. And this is adding insult to the injury. The 2014 McLean investigation started that at least 5 people are sexually assaulted every day in armed forces of Canada. Every day. 5 ladies, 5 women, 5 people who devote their lives to safety of the country are raped or sexually assaulted every day in the armed forces. And the armed forces in Canada, 100,000 people. So the latest allegation came to light in February when it was reported that General Walls, who had retired in January, was facing the accusation of inappropriate behavior. A couple of weeks passed, and his successor, Admiral MacDonald, had to step aside after his separate misconduct allegation was made against him to an incident in 2010. So the chief, the present chief, and the past chief, both of them. And if the chiefs are guilty, how can you blame the junior level officers? And it was reported that General Vance was also involved with a second female subordinate and sent an email invitation, a trip to clothing optional vacation destination. So these revelations put pressure on the defense minister and the prime minister to explain, but it also exposed the ineptitude, the inefficiency, and hypocrisy in the chain of command and undermined the work of high profile campaigns to end sexual misconduct. So, who are the people involved? Major Kelly Brennan, she told the House of Commons in April that they had a 20-year sexual relationship with her boss. Lieutenant Heather MacDonald detailed her case involving case against MacDonald, the then chief of staff. And she said this was leaked without her consent. Former military ombudsman Gary Walbaum also told the House of Commons committee that he raised the allegation of misconduct against Bonds with Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan. And he did so in March 2018, 3 years back. According to the ombudsman, Sajjan refused to review the evidence and told the committee later on that Wellborn was wrong to come to him, suggesting his involvement in a potential investigation without would risk politicalizing it. Now imagine if the defense minister says that he doesn't want to interfere, then what the hell is he there as a defense minister? And Sajjan says that's a very stupid statement, but then he says, in our strategy, the last thing we want is for elected politicians to make decisions that investigators need to take independently, yes. But you have to give the green signal. You are the head of the department. And by not giving the green signal, you are not living up to the oath that you took as a minister. Such a refer to the case to the Privy Council, a branch of the government that reports to the Prime Minister. The military ombudsman is not permitted to share the details without written consent from the complainant. And Wellborn didn't have that. So the situation was that 5 staff members continue to be sexually assaulted every day. And then the Prime Minister comes up with a lame excuse that he did not have any knowledge about the allegation against Walls in 2018. And no one knew it was a Me Too complaint. Now, when the Prime Minister says that did not have knowledge, that means there is no communication between the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister. So either it's the fault of the Defense Minister or of the Prime Minister, and one of them needs to resign. And what sort of a Prime Minister we have who doesn't know what's happening in the most important institution of the country, which protect the country? When members of the parliamentary committee asked why Trudeau was not informed, His chief of staff, Kathy Tedford, told on May 7 that they did not have any detail of the complaint at that time. This was something really, really shocking. So, how is the misconduct and harassment reported in military? There's a system for that. The military investigative arm in Canada is the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service. It's a branch that's responsible for investigating. In India, we have the Judge Advocate General, we have the provost, but here there's the Canadian Forces National Investigation Services. They investigate all offenses, serious or sensitive, but concerns have been raised about their efficacy. They launched investigation against Vance and McDonald, the chiefs. The systemic issues, including inadequate training and the fact that most of the investigators are males, no action was taken. And the women were hesitant. Why could not female members be appointed on this investigation team is beyond comprehension. Complaints can also be filed with the military ombudsman, but the office doesn't have any capacity to conduct a proceeding because only those public servants can be investigated when, for the privacy reasons, the written consent is not there. But anyway, these 13 women and then 5 women did complain. So what was the response of the government, of the military? Vance denied all allegations. General MacDonald declined to respond to the allegations. And the investigation is still ongoing. 3 years it takes that the two heads of the army, one after the other, are named, and no results are there. The Canadian military has a problem how it handles this misconduct case. And the former Supreme Court Justice, Maria Deschamps, made a report in 2015. And I'm amazed that this report was not acted upon either by the Prime Minister or by the Defense Minister. And she mentioned that the sexual assault in armed forces is endemic, hostile sexual environment, and it has been normalized to create a culture where no one speaks up, which functions to deter victims from reporting sexual misconduct. And this was reported in 2014. 2014 to 21, 7 years, and no action. One recommendation was to follow the footsteps of USA or Australia and France and create offices independent from the military to investigate such reports. Because at present, the people who are reporting to the chief cannot investigate the chief honestly and impartially. But then there was no action taken. And Justice Deschamps found that all efforts are stymied by the people who matter. So ultimately, after 5 years, Operation Honor was launched, and who led it? General Vance, who is guilty himself. And since that operation was launched, 581 more cases of sexual assault have been reported. The Canadian military is yet to set up an independent center because neither the minister nor the prime minister, who is shouting at the top of his voice for feminism, have done anything. So, why has this topic become a source of debate? Because, as per Justice Deschamps, the whole culture is hostile to the women and is conducive to more serious incidents of sexual harassment and assault. When the Justice of the Supreme Court makes such a sweeping statement, and even then no action is taken, the concerned people The sensitive people, the people who have the interest of the country at the heart, are naturally scandalized. A former armed force officer, Lee West, she has served the army for 10 years. And she says that she was sexually assaulted by a superior officer from her unit. And despite the military police involvement, there was no investigation. What a double standard. She has been jailed, charged, and then she sexually assaulted a male. So she was charged and she was sent back from Afghanistan. She is assaulted by an officer, no action. She assaults a male officer, she is thrown out. Another aviation technician, Amritol, joined the military in July 2018, and she was raped in her very first month of the training. So she left. Now, who is responsible? I would put the whole blame on the minister. The buck stops here. The fear of the Chinese attack today on Taiwan are growing. Russian troops are massed on the Ukraine borders. Both countries are pre-positioning for any future conflict. And as these threats evolve, Canadian military leadership is said to be petrified. It is in a state of shock because of this sexual misconduct crisis. We are not ready today for any real action. Every senior uniformed person has got their heads down and are just getting to past. It's bad, if not worse, worse than the Somali affair. You remember in 1993, there was a huge scandal of the Canadian armed forces in Somalia. It was a decade of darkness. Now, what happens? The Conservative Party introduced a motion that Justin Trudeau should fire his chief of staff because he failed to inform the prime minister about the sexual assault by the chief of army. As Justin Trudeau himself said, he was not aware. But Katie was aware. So why she did not inform? She should be thrown out. As a matter of fact, there has been a cover-up operation, and guilty in that are A. Katie, and second, Harjit Sajjan. As very clearly, Ombudsman Gary Wilson says that he received a complaint against the defense chief. He went to the defense minister, and the defense minister told him not to take any action. These were the exact words, quotes by the ombudsman. And Sajjan says that Walbert didn't reveal the substance of the allegation. When he says that the chief is guilty of this, what else do you want? This was a typical inane, stupid reasoning given by Harjit Sajjan. And he says that complaint does not matter. This is the word. When the defense minister says that a rape or a sexual assault by the chief of the armed forces doesn't matter, that means anybody can do that. It's inexplicable why Harjit is not being blamed. His appointment was always an accident waiting to happen. Now, Vance was his superior when they were in Afghanistan. Vance was the commander of the Canadian Task Force in Kandahar, where Sajjan completed his third and the fourth tour in Afghanistan as an intelligence officer. And when Sajjan's subsequent appointment as was political master was there, it put them in an awkward position, or it tied them together. Now the former boss becomes the junior, and the former junior becomes a boss. So this was a straightforward case for the minister doing his old boss a solid favor. He turned a blind eye, and once was not punished. This resulted in the Supreme Court Justice Maria recommending that forces need an independent center. But if the boss himself was to favor, what would independent centers do? Such partiality seems to be open and shut case of the minister failing to do his job and failing to be accountable for the actions. Agreed, the minister is a brave man. He was judged by the Brigadier General Fraser as the best single intelligence asset. My all credit and praise to Ajit Sajjan for being the best intelligence asset in Afghanistan. But the loyalty test was in 2017 when Sajjan said that he is the architect of Operation Medusa. And he had to apologize 11 times for that false, misleading lie. And now Trudeau is reciprocating his loyalty to Sajjan. In politics, devotion cannot be blind. And it's clear that the buck should stop with the minister. He had the power to investigate any matter connected with discipline, administration, or function of the Canadian forces. And that is under the National Defence Act. He failed to do so. He is guilty of dereliction of duty. He is guilty of protecting the guilty. And such a decision not to hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil of once is absolutely unacceptable. As a matter of fact, Lieutenant General Wayne Eyre and the Deputy Minister of Defense, Jody Thomas, they say that a new internal organization should be created. When would they create it? Sajjan has cut a desperate figure in question hours. And Mr. was asked, how could he have been appointed as a chief? He had no reply to that. So the it's incumbent on the opposition now to wake up. They should resist the temptation to score cheap political gain going after 10-4. KT is not important. Most important is Trudeau and Sajjan who are guilty. And as I said, dragging the culture of the Canadian armed forces into the third decade of the 21st century. It's imperative that the so-called weaker sex is not exploited. It's not a weaker sex, but it's physically weaker. And Canadian military cannot afford to be looking inward as the world situation becomes dangerous every day. We need our armed forces to be in the top efficiency capability. But when 5 members of the armed forces are sexually assaulted every day, can they really be in the top efficiency level? No. It's time for Harjit Sajjan to resign. It's time for Trudeau to sack Harjit if he doesn't resign. And it's time to set up an independent investigation team under a Supreme Court judge to investigate and create a special cell that these officers who are guilty are given exemplary punishment. And that's done without any delay. Any delay would be suicidal and destroy the foundations of Canadian armed forces as an institution. Thank you.